Hi, welcome back to the workshop for episode 15 of the Micawber Telecaster build. This time I'll be completing the work on the neck, firstly by sanding and polishing the lacquer and then by completing all the fretwork. So this neck's been sat for a couple of weeks now and it's ready for cleaning up. So the jobs we have to do on this are to flatten polish the lacquer on the neck and the fretboard. We've still got lacquer over all of the frets, but I'm going to leave that on until I've finished sanding, because obviously that's going to protect the frets from the sandpaper. Then once it's all cleaned up, we can then level and dress all the frets and we'll be pretty much good to go then. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do before I start any sanding is I'm just going to take a very sharp knife and very carefully I'm going to score the lacquer at the side of the fret. And this is just going to make it easier to get it off. Okay, so that's all the frets scored. The reason I scored them now before I rubbed the fretboard down is simply if I did kind of cause any damage or make a mistake, I've got a chance to fix it now before I've gone to all the trouble of polishing it up, etc. Luckily, I didn't cause any damage, we're all good. So it's just a matter now of a bit more warm soapy water and starting with some 600 grit paper, I'm just going to start working my way down the neck, flatting off the fretboard. And this is one of the main reasons that I've left the lacquer on the frets to this stage, is that it will protect them from damage from the wet and dry paper. Okay, so that's all rubbed down now to 1200 grit. It doesn't actually take that long because there's such small surface areas in between each of the frets that it only really takes a few seconds on each one. So to now get those up to the gloss that we want, I'm actually going to use just a bit of teacup on these. I'm not going to use the compound that I used on the body. I'm simply just going to buff it up by hand with a cotton rag. And see if we can get those in the light. You see they've come up really nicely, very quick. So it's just a case now of going down and doing the rest. Okay, so that's the fretboard fully polished up now. I think that's looking absolutely splendid. So I'm really happy with that. So next up is just to do the same process on the rest of the neck. But because of the nature of the shape of the neck, there's only really the headstock, the heel, the front of the headstock that are flat surfaces. The rest of it's all curvy. So this will actually polish up very quickly and easily. Okay, so it's the next day, time to start work on the neck again. It's all polished up beautifully now. I'm really happy with the gloss on it. As you can see there, reflections from the window, really good. So the next job is to get the frets leveled, but before we do that, we've got the small task of getting rid of all the lacquer that's on top of the frets. Now I've left this on deliberately while I was polishing because it just helps to protect the frets from the sandpaper, etc. But it's time for it to come off now. Now there's a number of ways you can go about this job of getting the lacquer off. Now I've seen people take a fret protector and a cloth soaked in thinners and just wipe it off that way. I've tried that and it didn't really work for me. It might work better on some lacquers than others, but it didn't take off the lacquer I was using. The other thing that I was really conscious of was if you get too much on your cloth, it's going to drip past the fret protector and kind of start melting your fretboard, and that's not really what I want. Another way of doing it that I've seen is to score the side of the frets like we did at the beginning, and then kind of take a sharp knife and flick it off. Again, I think that works better with some lacquers than others, and it doesn't really seem to work with this lacquer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little bar of brass, and in conjunction with a fret protector, I'm going to use this to scrape off the lacquer. Now I'm using brass because it's softer than the metal of the fret, so it's not going to mark the fret up at all, and the fret protector will stop it from marring the fretboard. And that goes really quickly, as you've just seen. So I'll bring you in closer and you can have another look at that. Okay, so that's all the frets cleaned off. Probably took 5 to 10 minutes to do that, so a relatively quick process. The brass hasn't had any negative effect on the frets at all, so they're all still good, no scratches. I don't know why I keep calling this a fret protector. It's got a great big hole in it that the fret sticks through. It's a fretboard protector. Okay, so now that we know that that's flat, we just need to get this masked up and ready for the levelling process. Okay, so that's it all masked up. What I need to do now is get rid of this cover off the bench and get this set up ready for the levelling. Okay, so I've got this set up. I'm quite lucky, the vise I've got will hold stuff like this quite nicely, and I've just set up a piece of MDF clamped down onto the top of the workbench just to kind of support the neck underneath. And obviously it's guitar neck, it's not really that long, so there won't be much flex in this section here that's unsupported. I'm not going to be pressing on hard anyway, so we shouldn't have a problem with that. And I'm going to do the levelling with a new purchase of mine. I've always used an old level before to do my levelling, and it's always worked really nicely. The only drawback with it is that you can only have a brace on one side, so I've bought myself this nice new snazzy levelling beam from Crimson, and I've set it up. It's got 180 on one side and it's got 300, 320 on the other side. So I can kind of take the thick of it off with the 180 and then clean up with the smoother paper. Hopefully give me a better start to the polishing job. So as always, from this stage, first thing I'm going to do is just run a line of black marker over all the frets. And then I'm simply going to start just levelling off very gently with the beam. This fret wire is very thin and low, so I really don't want to take much off at all if I can help it. So just start gently levelling these off. Okay, that's gone really well. Hardly took any material off at all. There was one or two that were a little bit higher than the others, but not too bad at all really. Okay, with that done, I'm just going to very quickly two layers of masking tape over the 12th fret and re-black the frets beyond there. I'm just going to go over those again. And what I'm trying to do there is just create a little bit of fall away past the 12th fret, so as they get closer to the body there's a little bit more room under them. It's not a huge amount, but it's enough just to stop it choking and buzzing a bit. Okay, so I'm relatively happy with the way that's gone. It's gone really quickly. Haven't had to take a huge amount off. Now I'm just going to go over them with a fret rocker and just make sure that there's no bad frets along there. So having just reviewed the footage of that fret levelling, I'm really surprised about how much movement there was in my setup. I thought it'd be a lot more stable than that. I think I'm going to have to do some research and find a way of building a jig to hold the neck more stable. Obviously I'm going to make a video about that, and if you've subscribed and hit the bell icon you'll know when it happens, won't you? Now I'm just going to go over them with a fret rocker and just make sure that there's no bad frets along there before we move on any further. Okay, so I've just been over them all with a fret rocker, couldn't find any high frets anywhere at all, so it feels really consistent right the way across the board. So next step is once again black them up and we can start the crowning. And to do the crowning I'm just going to use a traditional three-sided crowning file. You might be able to see there that all the corners are shiny. It's because they've been ground down, so they're safe edges, so they're not going to cut into your fingerboard, which is what you want. And all I'm going to do is simply start reintroducing the crown onto the frets where I flatten them down. I'll bring you in a bit closer so you can see this, but what we're aiming for is to just have a very thin line of black down the centre of the fret. So with the crowning done, I'm now just going to have a very gentle rub over the fretboard, first with some 600 wet and dry. And then with some 800 wet and dry. And all that's doing is removing the worst of the scratches from the levelling process. It's very fine grit paper, so you'd have to rub for an awfully long time to make any dimensional change to the frets. But that is looking quite a lot nicer. So with that done, next stage is to take a little fret end dressing file and just start to work my way along the frets, just rounding the edges and rounding the ends over. To give it a kind of a hemispherical end. Okay, so to do this, all I'm simply going to do is just start in one corner and round it in. Do the other one. So just work your way over the top. We'll give that a clean up with some wet and dry, and that will polish up to a really nice looking fret end. Okay, so with all the fret ends nicely dressed, and they do feel really silky smooth now, it's time to start cleaning them up ready for polishing. So I'm going to achieve that by using these little fret erasers, and basically what it is, it's a bit of rubber with a abrasive medium suspended in it, and I've got 4 grades of these, going from coarse right the way through to super fine. And simply all you do is you just use it like you would any other abrasive, sandpaper or whatever. And just polish your fret up. Just work your way through the grits, getting rid of any of the little marks that the other processes have left in the fret. And that's going to leave us very, very close to where we need to be for the final fret polishing. Okay, so after what feels like an absolute age of rubbing these with the fret erasers, probably developed an RSI in the process, it's time for the final stage of this polishing, and that is to get the Dremel on them with one of these little soft cotton polishing pads. And I'm going to be using what's left of my Autosol. Any metal polish will do for this. I mean, in a pinch you could use something like T-cut or the compound that I use to polish the body and the neck up with, but I find this stuff works really, really well. And it's simply a case of, you don't need much, just dabbing a little bit on a few frets, and you need your Dremel at kind of a medium speed, so not too fast, not too slow. And that will polish up to an absolute mirror shine within a matter of seconds. And there it is, all done. As you can see there, frets are nice and shiny. Now, I don't just go to all this trouble to make the frets look shiny and nice, although it does help. The real reason I do it is that this will make the guitar play much nicer. Anyway, with that done, it's now time for what I consider the worst part of all this fret work, and it's getting the masking tape off. And although this technique of putting a long strip of masking tape right the way down the neck at the beginning does help, this job's still an absolute pain. Okay, there it is. Needs a little bit more cleaning up work, but overall, really happy with that. Okay, so that's the neck done. I'm sorry if there was a lot of fast forwarding. There was a lot of work to get in, and I didn't really want to make the video any longer than it is. So this really is the last major work that needs doing on this guitar. So I'm going to be back very, very soon with the last video in this series, where we'll be putting this thing together and seeing how it sounds. So don't forget to give me a like if you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you very, very soon. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.